Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm very excited to film this video today because a lot of people have been asking me about how I actually go about the lit review process, how do I know what kind of papers to look for and things like that. So this video is kind of like my step-by-step process for the lit review and coming up with the actual information that is going to be in the different paragraphs. So structuring it, how I find out what are the different topics and like coming up with the different subtopics and then doing, research based on that to determine what are the main points and then coming up with the main points and formulating a paragraph around those. So it's kind of just like my step-by-step structure for how I go about the lit review. And yeah, I'm really excited about this video. And if you guys are as well, then please give it a thumbs up because it really helps me out in the algorithm. And I'm so thankful for everybody who has been, liking my videos and commenting and subscribing because it's helped me out so much with my channel. We're getting close to 1,000 subscribers, which means that I'll be able to get the community tab, which means we can interact a lot more, which would be really great. So I would really appreciate if you guys would subscribe, and if you want to see more videos like this, be sure to turn on the notification bell to all notifications so that you know when I have new videos. I'm going to take you through this video today on my laptop in a Word document or pages in my case of coming up with the different ideas for my lit review. So hopefully this video is helpful to you guys, and yeah, let me know in the comments below if this is something that you can use and if it's been helpful, and I will just get right into it. So we are starting with the chapter heading just so that we can have a bit of organization to this document. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to write out the main headings of this chapter. So the main sort of themes that I expect to have in my thesis overall, the main chapters that I'll have and the related work sections that are needed for that. So I'm going to write out those headings that I know already as being injury prediction and prevention, race time prediction, training session classification, fitness estimation, and what else? And personalized training programs. And those aren't necessarily going to be the definite ones, it's just these are ones that I already have an idea of how they would go, and they are likely to be main chapters of my thesis, but it's unknown necessarily right now if that's going to be the case. But anyway, so that's the first step, is I have these as separate headings. Just like this is almost like a blurb section to go back to for this. So I'm going to choose one of these. I'm just going to change all my font and stuff just so that this is a bit nicer to look at. Okay, and then I'm just going to have a new page and I'm going to pick one of these main chapters, and I haven't decided really yet if this is going to be one full chapter with my related work or if it's going to be more of a related work section in each main chapter of my thesis. That's not really decided yet, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really change anything for how I'm going to go about it. So you can see the first step here is to pick one of your subtopics or one of your general main topics. So I've picked injury prediction and prevention as my main topic to work on today. And the next thing that I want to do is think about some subtopics or questions for this that I might have. So the different questions that I have for this topic is, firstly, how often do runners become injured? So obviously my research is related to runners, but this could be I could make it more general and talk about sports injuries in general, but I don't think that's really necessary for this. So first question being, how frequent are running related injuries? So that's the first thing that I want to find out. Second thing would be the main point of this first point will be kind of providing a motivation for this research. Is obviously if running related injuries are very, very infrequent, then there's not really much point in doing this research. However, I already know that running related injuries are very common. Lots of people become injured when they're running, specifically for longer distances like marathons. But, you know, it's just the idea that you have to kind of go about this process and find your motivation for it first. So the first one will be like the motivation for why this is important. When I find out through my literature search that running related injuries are very high, and particularly it is so for marathon runners. So the second question I have would be, what are the risk factors for running related injuries? So that'd be good because that'll kind of answer the sort of prediction part of things, like can we predict injuries? If we know the risk factors for running related injuries, then we should be able to predict them based on a runner's factors that they have. And then the next question I have is, are there good prevention techniques? Like, these questions don't have to be well phrased or anything. This is just a general idea. So I'm thinking, if there's already well-established prevention, then, you know, there's not necessarily much that I can do except for recommend that they follow those things. So determining if there are good prevention techniques already, that would be useful, because it means that all I would need to do in my research would be to find a way to predict a runner's injury and then recommend whatever prevention program would suit them. And then the last topic will be, what are the advances exist in computer science? So that's basically, because my topic is, you know, using computer science, machine learning techniques to solve these types of problems, then it's important for me to know what has been done so far in computer science. I actually might change that to that. Yeah, that makes more sense. So you can see the first three questions here are more related to the sports science aspect of it and like the general understanding of this issue, like, are running related injuries common, what risk factors exist, and what prevention methods are out there already, and then what has been done so far in computer science. So those are the kind of things that I want to find out through this literature review. For this specific topic, I want to find out those questions, like I want to answer these. So it's likely that each of these will end up being their own paragraph for this part of the lit review. And that's kind of what I expect, is that I can come up with these subtopics and then each paragraph has its own subtopic. And now it depends, like there might be some that take up a lot of space and you end up needing a much larger one, but this is the general idea so far. So the next thing then, since we've already chosen our general topic and we've come up with some subtopics, the next thing that I would like to do is pick one of the subtopics and work on those. So I'm going to pick, how frequent are running related injuries? And these are the things that we want to find out through our first search. So now is the point that I've tried to come up with all of the keywords for this topic. So running, marathon, runner, marathoner. So trying to come up with the different words that could be associated with this topic. Running related injury, injury, incidence, frequency, incurrence of injury, just like those kinds of things. So I'm not going to go through the full brainstorming of keywords. But I would like to have this document kind of organized just so that you can see it a bit. So general topic. So just organizing this document a little bit better so that you can follow along a bit more. And then it means that you'll be able to do something like this yourself. Hopefully this is making sense so far, of how I'm going about this. Hopefully this is making sense to you guys. So I've brainstormed my keywords. We can just imagine that I've done all of my brainstorming first of all. And then I will do a search using some kind of database. It could be PubMed or whatever it is that you use. I'm not going to go through the full search in this video. I just want to explain the steps that I take for the lit review. So if you want to see a separate video on how I actually do the search and how you can do a search using these kinds of databases, then let me know in the comments below and I will do that for you guys. It's just that I think lots of people have been asking me about the general steps for a lit review and how I kind of come up with the main ideas. So this is kind of the main ideas coming up with kind of steps. So the first thing you're going to do is search for your papers. So using all of the keywords and stuff like that. So I'll be obviously searching for running related injuries and whatever sort of similar words to that. And then with also the incidents or some other words that are similar to that. And you've seen already probably my video on how I read papers and how I kind of decide whether they're worth the time or not. But you're going to come up from your search with a ton of papers. And I ask you only really to be looking at the ones that are relevant to your topic, the specific subtopic you're looking at. If you come across one that's interesting for another subtopic, then just move it into the box for that subtopic, but not to be reading loads of things at once and confusing yourself, but trying only to focus on reading the papers that are for this subtopic for the moment. So you want to read the title and the abstract and decide if this paper is actually relevant to your topic, because there's plenty of times that things become, that things are coming up in the search that aren't necessarily related. So you're going to have hundreds of articles come up there. So I invite you just to read the title first of all to determine if it's relevant to your topic, and then the abstract to decide if it's relevant to your topic. So we're going to read titles and abstracts, and then select or reject. It's fine to reject papers if you don't feel that they're relevant to your topic. That's absolutely fine. There's plenty that won't be. So you're going to be reading the titles and abstracts and deciding, selecting them or rejecting them. And if you select them, you kind of put them in one folder of your Mendeley or whatever it is that you use. So I would have a specific folder for injury prediction and prevention, and then a subfolder for how frequent are running related injuries, and then all of the papers would go in there. So then once I've read the titles and abstracts and selected a paper, you just want to do a very brief summary from reading the abstract. But the summary should be related to the specific subtopic. So you don't want to be including absolutely everything, but just the main finding for your subtopic. What is the actual relevance of that paper to your subtopic that you're looking into? So it should be very, very brief, like a couple of sentences, depending on the paper, of the main results that are related to your subtopic. So that would be the next step, would be coming up with these sort of almost like a rough draft document where you have just these summary sentences and things like that. And then you'll end up having all of these on the one page, and you can start to make some consensus from it. But first of all, the next thing that we're going to do is do a citation tracing. So search through the selected papers, who cited the selected papers and who is cited by them. So basically looking for the papers that are referenced by the papers that you've chosen, as well as look at the references that look at the papers that cite the chosen paper. So you can do that using Google Scholar. If you look up a paper, you can look at who cited them and stuff like that. And you can do the same thing with things like ResearchGate. Plenty of different websites that you can do this sort of citation tracing with. And this will help you find more papers. So you might find that you've had a paper from 2010 and it's a really good one. And then doing a citation tracing on that, finding all of the papers that have since referenced that paper will be very useful, because you can then find more new information about your topic. So I think that's a really good thing to do. So you want to do the citation tracing and then essentially go back to step 1 here until you're at a place where you don't take any more new papers, where you've kind of reached the point where you've gotten all the papers you think you can get for this topic. Okay, so that's the search part of things. And once you've done that, you can go on to the reading phase. And again, I have a video about how I read papers, and important note here is decide what parts of the paper, what sections of the paper are relevant to your subtopic. So what I mean by that is, for example, looking at injury prediction and prevention, this specific subtopic of how frequent running-related injuries are, that's something more that I just want to get the scope of. I want to understand how frequent these running-related injuries are. My research is not involved in going out and doing the same kinds of research that the people who have written these papers and, conducted these studies have done. That's not what my research is about. So for this topic, it's more important for me to have an understanding of how frequent are these injuries, as opposed to the methods that were taken to collect all of this information, if that makes sense. Whereas somebody who is actually studying this kind of injury as their entire study, and they're more interested in the sports science aspect of things, then it's going to be more important for them to know the methodology. For the section that I've chosen here, what has been done so far in computer science, that's going to be the kind of subtopic that is extremely relevant for my work, and I'm going to need to be very, very comfortable with the methodology sections for those papers, compared to some of the other ones where I do need to understand the methodology, but I don't need to know the absolute ins and outs of it, because I'm not going to be employing those strategies myself. So basically, you're going to go through the paper, you're going to read and get a good understanding of the papers. And for some of them, it's going to be more about the results, and for others, it's going to be more about the methods and those kinds of things. So yeah, and then during that, you'll probably add to your summary document a bit more, depending on what you find. As well, you need to think as well, from the citation tracing, you have to think, when you're doing the citation tracing, you want to just be a bit careful with some things, because you can end up with thousands of documents if you go through too much with this. So for example, if you've got a systematic review of 50 papers, you don't need to go back and then read all of those 50 papers to understand the systematic review. In that case, it's perfectly fine to just relate to the systematic review. And then when you're reading through that systematic review, if you come across anything that's specifically relevant that you would like to look at more, then you go back and find those papers. but otherwise it's not really necessary to do that. So I just want to make that point out there that, you know, it is possible for you to get completely overwhelmed with reading, and it's not what your research is entirely about. What you should do in the research is more find out what needs to be done and make a plan for how to do that, you know. It should be your understanding of what's missing, and, you know, you don't need to read every single paper that's referenced by a systematic review to understand that. So I hope that makes sense. So basically, yeah, do the reading in the way that suits you. For this kind of work, what suits me is looking a lot at the results sections and getting a general overview of papers that I don't necessarily want to do something similar to. So for these topics, it's more about understanding the state of affairs with this aspect of sports science. And then when I move on to the computer science, it's going to be very much needing to understand every part of the methodology section. So once you've done that and you've kind of put together your summary document, you want to then come up with the main points. So read through your summary document, which shouldn't have too much in it. Like you'll find a lot of the stuff that you find is all the same thing. So examples of main points that I can come up with from doing my review of this topic is, I'm just going to get some bullet points so it's a bit clearer. The things that I've seen so far is incidence of running related injury is high for runners of all distances. So that might be a lot of different points from a lot of different papers all together, that I now have this one general point of this, and then I could have a ton of references stacking up behind that from the different papers I've read that have all found the same thing. And then I'm going to have another couple of points. So ultramarathoners, so those are people who do like 30 plus mile runs. Marathoners experience a high rate of injuries requiring medical care. That's another point. There's a U-shaped relationship between time loss injuries. So those are injuries where you need to take time off, but you don't necessarily need to go to the hospital. So there's a U-shaped relationship between time loss injuries and running distance, which that is obviously going to be relevant because marathoners would be at the right side of that U shape, which means they're quite high for running related injuries. So that's obviously a relevant point. Highest for novice runners. So that means that new runners experience the highest amount of running related injuries, which might be expected because obviously you can expect that somebody who's just started running is going to be more prone to injury if they don't really know what they're doing. And then the last point that I have is injury incurrence is related to dropping out of running. So these are the main points that I've found, and they do flow quite well in this order so far. So you can already see that this might be putting together 100 different sentences in my summary document, and I've come up with these 6 sort of main points. And these will make up the main parts of my first paragraph, which will be about the incidence of running related injuries. And then the next thing that you need to add is a topic sentence and a concluding sentence. And then I'll pretty much have my first paragraph ready to go. So if you want to see, I'm going to do a future video about like sentence structure, like grammar, things like that, the kind of things that you need to know for academic writing. But this is just sort of a general idea, is that you have your paragraph with your main points, and then you have to add a topic sentence, so like an introductory kind of sentence that makes people, when they read this first sentence, they understand what you're going to be talking about in the paragraph. And then there's a concluding sentence, which generally in your literature review, your concluding sentences should kind of highlight the lack or the gap that exists still in the literature. So my topic sentence here is going to be running is taxing on the body. And then I can go into the next point pretty fast. Like, this is just an idea. It's not necessarily going to be how things are, but it's just that you can have the idea of how it would work. And then my concluding sentence is a clear comprehension of the risk factors associated with developing a running-related injury and injury prevention measures are crucial for the health, safety and motivation of runners. So I'm going to just read through this so you can have an understanding of how my paragraph is going to look. So even though this isn't set in stone and like these points will be expanded on, it's just the general idea, as you can see, of how it would work. So first point, my topic sentence, running is taxing on the body. The incidence of running-related injury is high for runners of all distances. Ultramarathoners experience a high rate of injuries requiring medical care. There's a U-shaped relationship between time loss injuries and running distance. Running-related injury occurrence is highest for novice runners, which might be expected. Injury occurrence has been related to dropping out of running. So a clear comprehension of the risk factors associated with developing ROI and injury prevention measures are crucial for the health and safety and motivation of runners. So I hope you have an understanding now of how I went about this. So the different steps that were taken to get to this point. So mapping out my main topics and then choosing one of these, delving into what the subtopics were, and then picking one of these, then doing a brainstorm of some keywords for this specific subtopic, doing a search which involves using the keywords that we've had before, reading the titles and abstracts and selecting some papers, doing a summary of the paper just from reading the abstract, doing a citation tracing to come up with some more papers that are relevant, that are different to what you found so far, and then doing the reading of your papers that you've chosen and adding to that summary document. And then from there, coming up with the main points, aggregating together things that you've seen from different papers into some main points, and then linking those with a topic sentence and a concluding sentence. And you can see that my concluding sentence is going to flow quite nicely into the next section, which is the risk factors, and then the following section, which is the prevention. So it's like this first paragraph sort of highlights the motivation for my research into injury prediction and prevention, because it talks about how, why is this necessary? Well, because injuries are very common for runners. And then it flows into the next two steps, which is the prediction and prevention. And then the final point, which is all about how the computer science aspects have come about things so far. So that is it for this video. I'm going to share this with you somehow. I don't really know how I'm going to do that, but maybe I'll just include it as a PDF. I don't know. Okay, I'll see how I can do that. Let me know in the comments below if you would like access to this, and I will see how I can do that. I hope this was helpful, because I definitely have had people asking me how I go about the steps. So like before, my previous video kind of showed the citation tracing that I was doing for one of my topics, and people were just a bit unsure as to how I even got to that stage where I had that paper. So these are just the general steps that I take to get myself to the point of making a paragraph for my lit review. And I hope it all made sense, and I hope it's going to be helpful to you guys. And again, so let me know what kind of videos you want to see related to this. I think the ones that I could do would be doing the actual search for papers. And then as well, the ones that will be coming your way will be the kind of paragraph structure and like editing and stuff like that. That would be related to the lit review. But you can see how this would work for, then the next steps obviously is like going back and doing all of these other different subtopics, and then once this one topic is done, going back to the other topics, the main topics, and then doing the exact same thing. So hopefully you guys understand that, and hopefully this will be somewhat relevant to how you could go about your lit review. I really hope that it will be. So thank you so much for watching. I'm glad to be making these videos for you guys, and I really hope they are helpful. But be sure to subscribe, because if you want to see future videos like this, you need to know about them. So make sure you hit the notification bell for all notifications. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, because it really helps me out. And I will see you guys in the next video.